I guess, let the group know. Brad and Ian asked me to join in the rotation. So this week would be my first go as a part of that officially, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity. And again, as we move through these, if y'all see ways that I could improve in organization of this and how this is handled, please bring it up. I respect all of your opinions, and I take any, as we see in the first verse, I take any instruction that comes the best that I can. So in chapter 12, just some things I want to point out before to kind of keep our mind open to it before we move into it. We're going to see these contrasts again as we see the wise and the foolish, the righteous and the versus the wicked, the diligent versus the lazy, and the truthful versus the deceitful. The way I read this chapter, I do see somewhat of a flow, even though it is in that section where it seems like it's a little more random. I do see somewhat of a flow. So keep your eye out for the teachable heart leading to a stable character, which then through that governing your emotions and disciplining your speech, and all of that in place, living diligently, not being lazy, and of course that would reflect in your public influence, and all of that, doing that for the Lord leads to life, eternal life specifically. So the first section I want to start off with is 1 through 3. Keith, could I get you to read 1 through 3?
Sure. Whoever loves instruction loves knowledge, but he who hates correction is stupid. A good man obtains favor from the Lord, but a man of wicked intentions he will condemn. A man is not established by wickedness, but the root of the righteous cannot be moved.
So we see this idea: loving instruction is and loving knowledge is a favorable trait, and a good man's obtains favor in that. A good man is not going to reject good instruction and good knowledge that comes his way. He is going to be seeking to be better, and through that, when he is taking on knowledge and loves the instruction of the Lord and takes the correction from his brethren, that leads him to be unmovable. It introduces this idea that the root or the foundation of righteousness cannot be moved. And I find that to be just very similar to what Jesus said, talking about the wise man and the foolish man and building the house on sand versus stone. I mean, this is one of these ideals that is paramount to any Christian. I do like the idea that in verse 1, where the New King James has it translated as stupid. But the idea is being brutish and basically the equivalent of being like livestock.
Yeah.
And I think it's irrational and untamed is kind of the idea. So, I mean, I want to hand this over for a moment. I mean, is there anything in this that y'all see that we could expand on or anything else before we move on to the next section?
Glad that you brought up the brutish part, because that's how the King James translates it. And to me, that's a more accurate description, because you're not just stupid. It infers that it implies that you're totally turned to your carnal nature, no more than an animal.
Yeah, and I think we can see this drawing to kind of the conclusion from this section is that a teachable heart establishes the foundation for the life ahead of you. Being open to that really does do it. Go ahead, Brad.
You were talking about seeing connections through there. Even in these first 3 verses, you've got the one who loves instruction, the good man, and the righteous man described in those verses, and those things are all connected. We sometimes hear people talk about, or maybe we ourselves talk about, well, he's a good person. He's just not thinking right or doing right. And I get, good people sin, but somebody whose life is defined by foolishness, by refusal to receive instruction, by wicked action, they're not good. So just like the one who loves instruction, the good man and the righteous are connected, so are the one who hates instruction, the wicked, and those who are practicing wickedness.
Yeah, I agree. Anybody got anything else? Okay. The next section I see is 4 through 12. Um, and that way, having that character or that foundation that's alluded to here in the first 3 verses produces stability and a good reputation without. Now, there's some nuance to this where you could, like I said, this isn't something that I'm like, this is what this section is talking about. But that's just, kind of trying to work through and how to go through it. This is what they seem to fit well to me. If we could get Wilson and Ian, if y'all could split this up. Wilson, could you get 4 through 7, and then Ian, could you pick up the rest?
Yes, sir. You said 8 through 12?
Yes, sir, 8 through 12.
Yeah. All right.
Verse 4. An excellent wife is the crown of her husband, but she who causes shame is like rottenness in his bones. The thoughts of the righteous are light, but the counsels of the wicked are deceitful. The words of the wicked are lie in wait for good, for bread, but the mouth of the upright will deliver them. The wicked are overthrown, and are no more, but the house of the righteous will stand.
A man will be commended according to his wisdom, but he who has a perverse heart will be despised. Better is the one who is slighted, but has a servant, than he who honors himself, but lacks bread. A righteous man regards the life of his animal, but the tender mercies of the wicked are cruel. He who tills his land will be satisfied with bread, but he who follows frivolity is devoid of understanding. The wicked covet the catch of evil men, but the root of the righteous yields fruit.
So I think verse 4 setting forth about this, the wife of a man, having an excellent wife is the crown of her husband, but she who causes shame is like rottenness in his bones. And then the following verse talks about, the thoughts of the righteous are right, but the counsel of the wicked are deceitful. I couldn't help but seeing a connection there with the wife being probably the one that we get our counsel from the most. And choosing that wife obviously is extremely important, because if we have wicked counsel, it's going to be very difficult for us to fight against the influence that we have. And of course, that would lead to it being difficult for us to have any stability in our life, and especially in the way that God has prescribed us to live our life. And in 6 and 7, we see the idea of the wicked speech destroys, the upright are delivered, and then the wicked are overthrown, but the house of the righteous stands. We see this, speech and your actions are directly tied to not only your life here. It's one of those where you can live as just as you want and be as good as you want and still suffer. I mean, we see people are suffering all over the world, but as a general rule, if you treat people correctly in the way that God has prescribed us to do, you will have a much more stable life, and you won't have that tumultuous existence that you bring upon yourself. It's this idea of living right and being able to demonstrate the Christian values is usually reciprocated in most instances. And when you do that, then your reputation there in verse 8, and I said, I understand these aren't tied exactly together, but I think they build to an extent to where If you take on that learning and instruction that you have in the beginning, and you have good counsel, and then you choose your words well, then your reputation then would also follow. That you're not, being perceived as someone who's wicked, and your wisdom is visible in that, and you don't hide it. We are to be a light to the world, and I think all of that helps build us a reputation on those on the outside who we may be somebody worth listening to. With things in daily living, but also into spiritual things. If you have a bad reputation, it's hard to get anybody to listen to you. There's a lot of things that I know preachers will do that aren't necessarily sinful in and of themselves, but the appearance of it, they'll withstand from doing it just so it can't be perceived. It's like, I know multiple guys who would basically, if a lady of the congregation had an issue and she brings it to them and she wants to talk about it in private, it's not going to be just me and you. We're going to have more people here, so that even though there may be nothing going on, but we're just going to have more people here, so that there is this understanding that everything's above board. And this section continues with, humility, and your provision, being proud and lacking, and then of course compassion, extending it even to your animals versus those who are wicked, don't care about that compassion. And of course, ending up 11 and 12 about that diligence leading to satisfaction versus chasing a fantasy leading a lack of sense. I mean, it's the righteous then they're rooted in that foundation that we talked about in verse 1 versus the wicked who really seek after what anybody else has. So in this, I'll pause, and I'll then turn it over to y'all. And do y'all have any comments in this, or things that you see that I missed that would be beneficial for the group?
I'll say something. Oh, go ahead, Jason. No, go ahead, Jason.
I was just going to say in verse 8, it just reminds me, good sense is a life where God is the center of our life. Our lives are God-centered, and that's reasonable, rational, practical, accurate. And to distort that, or to warp that, or to have a twisted mind set, then that would be one in which God is not at the center, where our life is at the center, our existence, and how we live to please self, and that being visible to others. It's not just indicative of it's not just meaningful to us, but other people can see that, and it becomes obvious then. Thinking maybe, well, it's just me and my mindset, it's my reality, but we are visible to others, how we live, and sometimes who is at the center of our lives, and that can bring glory to God, and it can bring shame to and reproach to ourselves if it's self-centered.
Go ahead, Ian.
Well, actually, I was going to build off of something that Jason had mentioned in connection with a different verse on Sunday morning, but it's kind of connected to what we're looking at here. And just giving credit where credit is due, Jason had made mention of an earnesty of faith, working outwardly, a genuine faith. And that's where we know it needs to start. But sometimes it's manifested to where people are trying to jockey for position, or outwardly manifest a certain behavior for others to see for whatever motive. But I find great comfort in passages like this, that if we'll just genuinely seek to do the Lord's will to the best of our ability, then you'll have what's coming to you outwardly as the Lord sees fit, and we can be content with whatever that is. I look at verse 8, a man will be commended according to his wisdom, but he who is of a perverse heart will be despised. I've known, this is a tragic thing, but I've known of men that are like Saul. They feed their belly. They want accolades. They want respect. They want esteem. And a lot of times they get the exact opposite of what they're clawing for. And people are turned off by that sort of thing. Whereas the person that keeps his head down and just tries to do what's right under all circumstances, we typically look to those people and really esteem them for their wisdom, and we want to be more like them. And so I see a lot of that in regard to this. Verse 10, a righteous man regards the life of an animal. I mean, while nobody's looking, I'm concerned about my animal over here that I'm taking care of. And but the tender mercies of the wicked are cruel. There's a contrast there, but it just seems to be there's a lot of things that are outwardly shown and manifested by what's residing in the heart, and we got all kinds of examples of that flowing through here.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, it seems like this block really reinforces stability, and going back to that foundation, being rooted and standing and commended and being satisfied and just being really set in where you know that God would have you to be, and being immovable from that position. But as Ian was mentioning there, that these outward things, that is really just revealing. And I think this next section, 13 through 23, really get into that, where the heart is really revealed through emotion and your speech, and really how you conduct yourselves. It seems like the main focus of this is really on speech as a section. If I could get Brad, could you read 13 through, let's see here, 18, and then Jason, could you read through 23, 19 through 23?
I heard 13 and then I heard teen. I didn't hear the first part.
18.
Same thing.
18.
18.
13
Okay.
to 18.
For some reason on my end, when you start to say the word, it kind of cuts out just a second. But all right, 13 through 18. Sorry about that. The wicked is ensnared by the transgression of his lips, but the righteous will come through trouble. Righteous will come through trouble. A man will be satisfied with good by the fruit of his mouth, and the recompense of a man's hands will be rendered to him. The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but he who heeds counsel is wise. A fool's wrath is known at once, but a prudent man covers shame. He who speaks truth declares righteousness, but a false witness deceit. There is one who speaks like the piercings of a sword, but the tongue of the wise promotes health.
Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. Deceit is in the heart of those who devise evil, but those who plan peace have joy. No ill befalls the righteous, but the wicked are filled with trouble. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who act faithfully are his delight. A prudent man conceals knowledge, the heart of fools proclaims folly.
This section really seems like it is really leaning on self-control, and really your lack of self-control or your having self-control is based on where your heart actually is. That your heart is the driving energy, or the driving force behind whether or not you will, you know, reveal your through a heart that's wicked. You will reveal it, and it's because you don't have restraint, you don't have that teachability, you don't care about how you're perceived in your speech, and you don't mind lying to people, and you really have no discernment on when to speak and when not to, versus the one who has a heart that is set on God, and a loving heart and a caring heart, that then produces one who, verse 13, talks about the foundation of the righteous, or excuse me, the righteous will come through trouble, and that being in contrast to the one who's wicked in the transgression of his lips. All through this, we again see that contrast of one who has a good heart versus one who doesn't. And going back to the first section, we see that, receiving that instruction and looking to be found in a state that God would find pleasing, in that you develop emotional control. That controls your speech. You won't lie because God hates lies. Your heart is set on the betterment of others. And again, that produces the kind of stability that others can recognize. Our speech really, it reveals our morals. It can really change our direction in life, because there are serious consequences to saying things that you shouldn't. We have free speech, but that doesn't mean there aren't consequences for what you say. And then, of course, I think controlling your tongue is also a sign of the covenant that you were baptized into, because you respect God and you want to represent him the way he wants to be represented. That holding your tongue at times, choosing the words before you speak, taking every thought into subjection, that is a true sign of you not living for yourself, but living for God ultimately, and for others. So in this, there's so much here that is practical. Anybody got anything they want to add to this? Go ahead,
I would
Keith.
say that if we have a tender and moldable heart, that the word of God will have an effect on us, and our heart will be changed to become more like God. This goes to compassion to animals, compassion to those in need, and everything else. Now, James says that no man can tame the tongue, and he's right. Because whatever's in your heart will come out your mouth eventually. So the problem's not the mouth, the problem is the heart. If you continue to, say things to offend people, or without thought, or impulsively, the words of the faithful should be measured, and not just, talk to hear your own voice.
Yeah, I think verse 18 nails that down. So there's one who speaks like the piercings of a sword, but the tongue of the wise promotes health. Well, I see Lisa's comment. Yeah, you nailed it. Absolutely. Yeah, that's dead on. Anybody got anything else?
Two things, Keith. I appreciate that. I don't know that I thought about James 3 that way. Thank you for that. That was very insightful. And Rick, I also appreciate you mentioned when you started that you felt like there was a flow of thought through here, and I thought you explained that well. We can look to people, and we observe and we make judgments based on what we see, and sometimes we look at folks and it's immediate. That fellow doesn't have a lot of discernment, or oh wow, that guy he's very wise in the way he carries himself. And I don't know that I saw that at first glance, but the way you explained that helped to shine that forth through the chapter. Thank you.
Go ahead, Wilson.
Yes, when we look at this group of verses about the speaking and what is in the heart, it really, when people speak out, you can really know what is in them, because how they speak, or what. If I'm talking about, if somebody came into a room and just kept silent, you didn't know what kind of a person they are. But when they open their mouths and start to speak, that is when you know exactly how their heart is, and what they think, how they believe, just like a passage that says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. So we are going to learn many things when we listen to people. There's a man who said that when you listen, you learn things, but when you speak, you can only speak the things that you know. So these are a group of good verses that are going to teach us as we go along in life about listening at the speaking and filtering what we speak, and then learning from others as they speak.
Yeah, you definitely reveal yourself when you speak. I remember early on in the Bible classes at East Hill that I remember just some of the things that I would say and points I would make. I think back now and I'm like, that's very telling where I was versus I didn't have enough knowledge and thought I did and I was wrong and I made that very apparent. And I can look back at that and see it. But I guess really the point there is to continue to grow, and then as you mature, you will draw back those things where well, maybe I'm not so sure on this. Let me just keep silent and see what some of these more mature Christians have to say about it.
I still feel that way myself sometimes, but I get what you're saying, and that's what's the old saying? You live and you learn. We continue to grow, and I'm sure Keith. I'm looking on here, Keith. Maybe you're the oldest one that I can see. Ronnie's on there, but he's not got his camera on. But the older we get, I'm sure Keith will be the first one to say he doesn't have it all figured out yet, do you, Keith? We just keep on learning, and but I'm with you. When I'm in a room full of older people, I want to try to draw off of them and get their experience, their wisdom at the forefront. So I'm with you in that.
This may be the first time I've ever been called the old man in the group.
There's a first time for a lot of things, but should not be a first time for everything. So any other comments on this section before we move to the last part? Okay. So this last section, I see a markers about diligence and influence, and of course that final outcome. I'll take this one and read. The hand of the diligent will rule, but the lazy man will be put to forced labor. Anxiety in the heart of a man causes depression, but a good word makes it glad. The righteous should choose his friends carefully, for the way of the wicked leads them astray. The lazy man does not roast what he took in hunting, but diligence is man's precious possession. In the way of righteousness is life, and in its pathway there is no death. I feel like there is so much said in this little section. Of course, this diligence work produces, in a way, leadership in you. If you experience it's your word in the if put forth that time, you will gain knowledge in where you would then be able to lead others to be more productive. This idea of the anxiety in the heart of a man causes depression, but a good word makes it glad. I can't help but think about, Jesus talking there, the in Matthew 5 through 7, that Sermon on the Mount, and how I can't help but think about that good word being the word of God, and that really being what drives you to having comfort in those times of anxiety, to being able to put off that anxiety because of your faith. But I also think that good word from a brother, from a sister, can really pull you out of a situation to where you've let your thoughts overtake you. It can help put things back into check and see a broader picture and not be so focused on the minute detail of what's going on that is causing you distress. And I think that flows perfectly into the next verse, where the righteous should choose his friends wisely and carefully. That is paramount to all of us, choosing who we take our influences from. And I think in our digital age, that could be expanded not just to the friends that you have that are personal friends, but those who you let in through social media. Whether you realize it or not, you are being influenced by them if you're not aware of what you're taking in. I think there's a very valid point to listening to the arguments of people who believe different things, and of course putting them up to the test of Scripture. But I think there is a sense in our world that we live in where, everybody's just trying to do the right thing for God, where that we know very, very surely that they are fooled and they are leading others astray. And we just have to make sure we're on guard, and we test everything by the Scriptures to make sure we don't fall into that bunch. And of course, this idea of laziness and wasting away what you took hunting. I mean, I see that for sure about opportunity, and how practical is that for us in our daily walk, about how many opportunities do we walk past and don't take a moment to, let me tell you about Jesus, or, however that comes about. But I think a lot of us, and I'm definitely guilty of this, I miss opportunities all the time, whether it doesn't seem like it's the right situation, or I didn't see a way to get, okay, how do I bring this up? And you're so concerned about offending and timing that sometimes it leads you to decision paralysis where you don't do anything. And I think that's something we all have to work on. And I'm definitely pointing those two fingers back at me on this one. But if we take everything that has been put forth in this chapter and everything that we've seen in the Proverbs so far, I mean, that leads us on that pathway where there is no death. I see the culmination of all these instructions leading to everlasting life. And if we do that, then that is ours. That's pretty much all I got for that one. I probably over talked in that one a lot more than I meant to. But does anybody else got anything for this section? Go ahead, Brad.
To make a confession. Verse 25 is one that, is something that I like the connection you made to the gospel and, what Jesus offers. When he says in Matthew 6, don't worry, he doesn't just keep beating that horse. Don't worry, don't worry. He says don't worry, but he gives words of gladness to help bring people out of that anxiety. And I know at times when I see people who are struggling with anxiety or they're worried about things that they shouldn't be worried about, I want to concentrate on the don't worry, don't worry. Don't you know Jesus said don't worry? It's a sin to worry, and they know that. They need something to help them get out of that. And so give them some words to help make them glad and help them not just see the problem. They probably already see that. Help them to find the solution to get out of that.
I think that ties back into like Leeks' comment about verse 18. We can just state the obvious that Jesus said don't worry, or we can try to lift them up. And I think that's a really good point. Anybody else got anything else? Okay.
Good points, brother. Thank you.
Yeah, I went ahead and I pulled some just passages that are in the New Testament that kind of correspond to this. Those that would correlate with loving correction. Hebrews 12, 5 through 11. And that discipline proves sonship. And of course, James 1, verse 21, receiving that word with meekness. Of course, the speech reveals the heart, Matthew 12, 34 through 37. Your heart's going to shine through how you act. The verse that James 3, 1 through 12, the tongue is fire. Of course, we have that. There, Paul writing to the church in Ephesus in chapter 4 and verse 29 that there should be no corrupt words in us. In Colossians 4 and verse 6, that our speech needs to be seasoned with salt. And that's the same thing that Jesus said. That the words really expose the inner man and carry the eternal weight. Emotional restraint, James 1, Ephesians 4, truth enduring, 1 Peter 1 and John 8. That diligence and work, Colossians 3 and 2 Thessalonians 3 and Romans 12. Peacemaking and joy, of course, Matthew 5 and Romans 14. Righteousness leads to life. You could just put your finger anywhere in the New Testament and you'll find that one. Go ahead, Keith.
I'll work on that one. But regarding anxiety, I've never really understood it, never experienced it. I know it's a thing, but I think Paul gives the answer to anxiety when he's talking to the Philippians in chapter 4, verses 6 and 7. He says, "Be careful or anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. And the peace of God, which passes all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus." Now, you can't have anxiety and peace in the same mind. So that is the answer. Yeah, if you're worried or concerned about something, give it to God in prayer and move on. You know?
One of those that is so much easier to teach than to practice. It definitely is. Well, if anybody's got any more comments about the study, if maybe there's something in the previous verse that you saw that we moved on from that you have a comment, please take this time. Go ahead, and if not, that's all I have for you.
I appreciate it, Rick. And we look forward to being back together next week. It's for 2 chapters in a row, we've had a lot of warnings about over speaking, and so sometimes it's hard to generate a lot of discussion when you're telling when we're reading that, hey, not allowed to speak so much. So maybe 13 will get people chatting a little bit more. But appreciate your work. I really like there at the end pulling in some New Testament verses that are drawing from the Proverbs, and you'll find that just all through. So maybe that'll be a good practice for us to try to implement it. Thank you for that. Look forward to seeing everybody next week. And I think Ian, if nothing hinders, will be leading us through that discussion. Look forward to that.
All right, look forward to it. I hope
We'll
y'all
see
have a
y'all.
great day. Thank you, Rick.